Imagine the unimaginable, losing a loved one to senseless violence. Now picture yourself face to face with their killer in a courtroom. This is raw, unfiltered emotion captured on camera. From parents attacking their kid's killer in court to siblings seeking justice, we have compiled the most shocking and powerful confrontations. But what drives families to take such drastic actions? And what are the consequences? Let's dive into these intense courtroom dramas and explore the complex emotions behind them. Decene Brown. This is the moment when raw grief and a desperate need for justice exploded in an Ohio courtroom as the father of a slain toddler lunged at the man accused of taking his son's life. A courtroom video captures the agonizing scene. The father, Tonio Hughes, was overcome with rage as he attacked 22-year-old Decene Brown, the man charged with the heinous crime. Sheriff's deputies, caught off guard by the sudden eruption, scrambled to restrain the enraged father. A chaotic struggle ensues as they wrestle Hughes to the ground and call for backup. Despite being handcuffed, Hughes tried to charge at Brown again, his anguish and anger overpowering him. He was eventually escorted out of the courtroom. The reason for Hughes's outburst becomes clear as details of the case emerge. Brown, according to prosecutors, was accused of a double murder. He stabbed Nitisha Lattimore, who was Hughes's girlfriend, in their Walnut Hills apartment. The horror didn't end there. Authorities believe Brown left Lattimore's body in the apartment for days before attempting to dispose of it callously. After securing a body bag, Brown got rid of her body by throwing it into the river. But the most nightmarish twist in this tale of depravity involves the couple's young son, Nilo. Brown is alleged to have abducted Nilo after his mother's death, committing a final act of unimaginable cruelty. He reportedly threw the defenseless 3-year-old boy alive from a bridge into the Ohio River. Nilo's body has never been recovered, adding a layer of unbearable torment to Hughes's already shattered world. The courtroom attack, while a violation of decorum, lays bare the raw emotions at play in this tragedy. The aftermath of the courtroom eruption was swift and severe. The judge, clearly shaken by the outburst, held Hughes in contempt of court. The weight of the law came crashing down, sentencing Hughes to 7 days in jail for disrupting the proceedings. While the judge acknowledged the unimaginable pain Hughes was experiencing, maintaining order in the courtroom was paramount. Meanwhile, Decene Brown continued to plead his innocence. He denied any involvement in the deaths of Nitisha Lattimore and her son Nilo. His defense team also presented a new argument in an attempt to spare Brown from the death penalty. Brown's attorneys argued that their client suffered from bipolar disorder, a mental illness that should disqualify him from capital punishment. A state law, enacted in 2021, aimed to provide a safeguard for individuals with severe mental illnesses. This law listed 4 specific conditions, including bipolar disorder, which, if diagnosed, could make a defendant ineligible for the death penalty. Brown's legal team presented evidence to convince the judge that their client fell under this category. The judge, after careful consideration of the arguments presented, ultimately ruled against Brown. He determined that Brown did not suffer from a qualifying mental illness at the time of the alleged crimes. This decision meant that Brown could still face the death penalty if convicted. Yuren Balbuena. Yuren Balbuena, a seemingly ordinary 33-year-old, harbored a darkness that would tear a family apart. In February 2020, a deadly confrontation erupted within the walls of his Simi Valley apartment, shattering the lives of those involved. It all began with concern for a daughter's well-being. Zaira Patino Trejo, Balbuena's 31-year-old girlfriend, had gone silent, prompting her worried mother to rush to the couple's residence. Upon arrival, the mother was met with a sight that confirmed her worst fears. Zaira bore visible signs of abuse. The mother, aware of Balbuena's history of domestic violence, desperately tried to take her daughter away. However, Balbuena, fueled by a possessive rage, blocked their escape. A struggle ensued, shattering the facade of normalcy. He slashed the mother twice across the face before turning his rage on Zaira. In a frenzy, he grabbed not one but several knives and used them to stab her over 30 times, though prosecutors argued the count was closer to 95. After witnessing the murder of her daughter, the severely injured mother fled the apartment and called 911 her. Balbuena was later convicted of first-degree murder, battery causing great bodily injury, and assault with a deadly weapon against Patino Trejo's mother. During the sentencing hearing, the weight of the crime pressed heavily on everyone present. The victim's mother, raw with grief, began delivering an emotional impact statement, detailing the devastating impact Zaira's loss had on their family. Suddenly, the quiet dignity of the courtroom was shattered. Overcome by a surge of unimaginable grief and rage, the mother's husband, who happened to be Zaira's stepfather, lunged at Balbuena. This grieving man, desperate for a semblance of justice, managed to land a punch or two before bailiffs intervened, separating the two men. A photo captured the aftermath of this emotional outburst: a handcuffed and bewildered Balbuena, held back by a court official, the echo of the attack hanging heavy in the air. The stepfather, unable to contain his emotions, was removed from the courtroom. And after a delay of about 45 minutes, the impact statements continued. The legal system ultimately delivered its verdict. For his heinous crime, Urin Balbuena received a sentence of 33 years to life in prison. However, no amount of punishment could truly mend the broken hearts left in the wake of this senseless violence. Frank De Leon. A thick tension hung heavy in the air of the Houston courtroom. Family and friends of a murdered 16-year-old girl named Diamond Alvarez gathered for a hearing that promised a semblance of closure. Little did they know the day would take a sharp turn, erupting in a raw display of grief and fury. The reason for the hearing: 19-year-old Frank De Leon, Diamond's ex-boyfriend, stood before the judge. He had agreed to plead guilty to her murder in exchange for a 45-year prison sentence. This plea deal, though bringing a measure of justice, couldn't erase the gaping hole left by Diamond's absence. The details of the crime itself were a chilling narrative. In January 2022, Diamond, while walking her dog in their southwest Houston neighborhood, was gunned down. The shots, a total of 22, shattered the peaceful afternoon. Prosecutors revealed that Diamond had planned to meet De Leon, who was then 17, to confront him about his infidelity. He had been involved with another person while still dating her. This meeting, orchestrated through text messages, lured Diamond to a secluded field near her home. This was where she was taken out by a barrage of bullets. The gunshots alerted Diamond's family, who rushed outside upon hearing the disturbing sounds. The dogs returned without Diamond sent a jolt of terror through them. Frantic calls to the police were made, and a desperate search for Diamond began. Law enforcement didn't have to look far. De Leon was apprehended by police soon after the crime, and the weight of evidence pointed towards him. Now in the courtroom, he faced the consequences of his actions. The following events would expose the depth of the emotional wounds he had inflicted. After De Leon accepted the plea deal, several family members of Alvarez were given the opportunity to deliver victim impact statements. Diamond's mother, Ana Machado, took the witness stand to give a victim impact statement. As she finished her statement, she walked toward De Leon, who was sitting at a table with his attorney, but a bailiff blocked her path. Suddenly, the courtroom erupted in chaos. Diamond's uncle, fueled by a shared grief and thirst for justice, lunged towards De Leon. Court security reacted swiftly, restraining him before he could reach the defendant. But this wasn't the end of the outburst. Amid the chaos, De Leon's mother inexplicably shoved Ana Machado. The courtroom dissolved into pandemonium. A woman, acting on instinct, tackled De Leon's mother to the ground. Bailiffs soon swarmed the scene, restoring order. The pandemonium within the courtroom had a ripple effect, extending beyond its walls. In a separate courtroom within the same building, a defendant awaiting a hearing on a revoked bond used the opportunity presented by the commotion to make a daring escape. Later, after the courtroom regained its composure, Ana Machado spoke with reporters, expressing her profound anger and praying for the day when she might find peace. She also offered an apology for her actions in the courtroom. As for De Leon, the plea deal ensured a significant portion of his life would be spent behind bars. He would have to serve at least half of his 45-year sentence before even being considered for parole. This sentence, however, could never bring Diamond back. It served as a meager form of justice, a pale reflection of the life extinguished by a single terrible act. Victor Nathaniel Rivas. In a Bexar County courtroom, the family of 15-year-old Ethan Soto gathered for a hearing. The teenager's life was tragically cut short in May 2022, and they faced the young man accused of taking it away, Victor Nathaniel Rivas. Rivas, only 17 at the time of his arrest in September 2022, stood charged with a crime fueled by revenge. Court documents painted a chilling picture of the events leading up to the deadly shooting. Apparently, tensions between the teens began brewing just hours before the fateful encounter. Investigators pieced together a sequence of events that exposed a calculated plan for revenge. According to the affidavit, things started with a theft on May 15, 2022. Soto allegedly stole vape cartridges from Rivas. This act of theft sparked an immediate response. Rivas fired shots not only at Soto, but also at his family's home. Thankfully, no one was injured in this initial outburst of violence. Hoping to quell the escalating situation, Soto's mother stepped in. She believed that by paying for the stolen items, she could bring an end to the growing animosity. She then met with Rivas to hand over the money, thinking the matter was settled. But peace wasn't meant to be. Just a few hours later, a sinister plan unfolded. Rivas, who wanted payback, allegedly messaged a young girl on Instagram. This unsuspecting girl was unwittingly drawn into a web of deceit. Rivas manipulated her, turning her into bait. Through their online messages, he convinced her to lure Ethan out under the guise of a drug deal. The girl then contacted Ethan on Instagram. Pretending to be interested in buying vape cartridges, she arranged to meet him near his house. Ethan, unsuspecting of the danger that awaited him, left his home on the afternoon May 16th, believing he was going to meet this potential customer. However, the girl was nowhere to be seen at the designated spot. Instead, Ethan walked straight into an ambush. Rivas, who was waiting in the shadows, emerged and opened fire. Ethan was struck multiple times, the bullets inflicting wounds that would ultimately take his life. He was rushed to the hospital, but despite medical intervention, he succumbed to his injuries. Ethan's death left his family shattered. His mother, understandably distraught and seeking answers, confronted Rivas after the shooting. However, Rivas remained defiant, denying any involvement in her son's death. This denial couldn't hold up for long, though. An investigation by law enforcement officials began to chip away at Rivas's fabricated story. A thorough examination of his phone revealed the incriminating messages with the girl, detailing the plot to lure Ethan away. Cell phone data also placed Rivas in the vicinity of the shooting, further solidifying the evidence against him. While awaiting his murder trial, Rivas appeared in the Bexar County courtroom where a chaotic scene unfolded. It was during this period that Rivas made a gesture in the direction of Ethan's grieving family. This action provoked family members to leap over a courtroom partition and assault Rivas. The sanctity of the courtroom was broken. Two sheriff's bailiffs intervened swiftly. They managed to separate the enraged family members from Rivas, preventing further violence. Unfortunately, the incident appeared to trigger a chain reaction. Other family members presumably equally overwhelmed by grief and anger, became disruptive. The situation escalated further, forcing authorities to take action. 4 individuals, 2 adult males and 2 juveniles, were arrested for their roles in the courtroom chaos. They were charged with assault and disrupting court proceedings. Following the attack, Rivas was left with a black eye and a bruised face and was treated by paramedics at the courthouse. Subscribers Pick. Now it's time for today's Subscribers Pick. The powerful image we are looking at captures a dramatic courtroom scene filled with raw emotion and physical confrontation. The first half of the split image shows a man in an orange prison jumpsuit as he lunges aggressively toward another man. His face is contorted in fury, tattoos are visible on his arms, and he appears uncontrollable. The second half of the image intensifies the moment, showing another prisoner being forcefully held back by a uniformed officer, both men's expressions reflecting the tense, high-stakes atmosphere. This image vividly portrays a heart-wrenching moment often unseen by the public: parents attacking their kid's killer in a court. The pain and anger are palpable, showing the depths of grief and the human desire for justice, or perhaps vengeance. The image raises questions about the limits of human endurance in the face of tragedy and the powerful emotions that can erupt in such settings. What are your thoughts on the emotional toll such courtroom confrontations take on families? Share your opinions in the comments below. Dale Williams, Sr. In an Ohio courtroom in July 2019, convicted murderer Dale Williams Sr. awaited his sentencing for the killing of Elizabeth Pledger Stewart, a 46-year-old woman who had been his ex-girlfriend. The weight of Elizabeth's absence pressed heavily on her loved ones, especially her two sons. The details of the crime itself were a chilling testament to Williams's rage. In June 2017, in a horrifying display of cold-bloodedness, he had hunted Elizabeth down. He had then crashed into her car before repeatedly shooting her. The police apprehended him at the scene after he surrendered. Back in the courtroom, however, justice seemed sterile, confined to procedures. For Elizabeth's sons, the pain remained raw, and the yearning for vengeance potent. As the sentencing loomed, a video captured the moment when emotions boiled over. One of the sons lunged across a table towards Williams. Law enforcement, anticipating such an outburst perhaps, was present. A struggle ensued as they wrestled him to the ground, determined to prevent him from reaching the convicted killer. Seeing his brother in action, the victim's other son joined the fray. In their eyes, the legal system hadn't delivered the kind of justice they craved. They were determined to take matters into their own hands. A chaotic fight erupted. Both men repeatedly struck Williams while struggling against the officers trying to restrain them. The struggle continued with raw desperation, and only when a taser was deployed against one of the sons did the fight finally come to a stop. The eruption of violence in the courtroom had a ripple effect. The victim's sons were swiftly apprehended and led away. They faced charges of assault, obstructing official business, and contempt of court. A harsh reminder that while their grief was understandable, their actions had consequences. Dale Williams Sr., the man at the center of the storm, wasn't spared from the chaos either. The attack left him battered and bruised, necessitating a trip to the hospital for a checkup. As a result, his sentencing was postponed. When the day for sentencing finally arrived, Williams appeared stoic. The judge delivered the sentence, 20 years behind bars. This verdict, though unable to bring Elizabeth back, offered a measure of accountability for her brutal murder. Williams offered no reaction to his sentence. Perhaps it was a mask of acceptance, a resigned understanding of his fate. Perhaps it was a deeper darkness, a place where remorse had yet to take root. Whatever his internal state, he was led away. His chapter in this courtroom drama finally closed. Michael Madison. This video taken in a Cleveland court shows the moment the father of a murdered woman launched himself across a courtroom table to attack her killer, a convicted sex offender. Van Terry, the father of Sherelda Terry, had just walked to the front of the courtroom to deliver a victim impact statement. As he turned toward Michael Madison, the convicted murderer, Madison gave him a malicious smile. Overcome with grief and rage, Terry lunged at Madison, prompting immediate action from sheriff's deputies. Madison and his attorneys scrambled to get out of the way as officers swarmed Terry, dragging him out of the courtroom and eventually ushering him out of the courthouse. The case that brought them all together began with a horrifying discovery. A cable television worker, responding to a service call, was struck by a pungent, putrid smell emanating from a garage shared by Michael Madison. Upon investigating the source, the worker stumbled upon a scene that would send shivers down anyone's spine. A decomposing body, wrapped in garbage bags and bound with tape. This grim discovery unraveled a macabre chain of events. Further investigation by the police led them to a vacant house in a nearby backyard, where additional bodies were found, hidden away in a desperate attempt to conceal the monstrous deeds. The victims were identified as 38-year-old Angela Deskins, 28-year-old Shatisha Sheely, and Van Terry's daughter, 18-year-old Sherelda Terry. The investigation that followed painted a grim picture. Michael Madison, the man Van Terry had lunged at, confessed to strangling two of the women. However, he claimed he couldn't remember killing the third. Perhaps this was a hollow attempt to distance himself from the full scope of his crimes. Prosecutors, piecing together the timeline of events, revealed a 9-month reign of terror. Shatisha Sheely was the first victim, murdered in October of 2012. Angela Deskins followed in May of 2013, and Sherelda Terry met her tragic end in July of the same year. Madison's attorneys never contested his guilt during the trial. Instead, they focused on sparing his life by presenting evidence of the lasting psychological damage Madison suffered due to physical abuse during his childhood. Testimonies revealed that Madison had been abused by his drug-addicted mother, a stepfather, several of his mother's boyfriends, and other family members. Following Van Terry's dramatic courtroom attack, Cuyahoga County Common Pleas Judge Nancy McDonnell decided not to clear the courtroom. After a 15-minute delay, the hearing resumed. Judge McDonnell accepted the jury's recommendation to sentence Madison to death. She had the option to sentence him to life in prison without parole, but chose the death penalty. In her eyes, the sheer brutality of Madison's crimes far outweighed the tragic circumstances of his childhood. The horrific nature of his actions, the snuffing out of 3 innocent lives, demanded a life in return. The evidence presented by the defense, the tales of a nightmarish upbringing, resonated with the judge, but they didn't absolve him completely. However, the road to execution would likely be a long and winding one. Lengthy appeals, a hallmark of capital punishment cases, would undoubtedly follow. Justice, though served in the courtroom that day, would take years to be fully realized. Lindy Jones. A tense quiet hung heavy in the air of the Orangeburg County courtroom. 19-year-old Lindy Jones stood before the judge, awaiting his sentence for a crime that shattered lives. He had pleaded guilty to the August 2019 murder of 18-year-old Willie Fields, a young man whose absence left a gaping hole in his family. The story began months earlier, when Willie Fields vanished without a trace. His worried family reported him missing, their hearts heavy with a gnawing fear. Days later, the unimaginable news arrived. Willie had been found dead, shot to death, and left off a desolate roadway. The investigation that followed led to the Jones brothers. Lindy Jones, the elder brother, was charged with murder, accused of pulling the trigger that ended Willie's life. His younger brother, Jalen, faced a charge of accessory after the fact, suspected of playing a role in the aftermath of the crime. Now, in the confines of the courtroom, Fields' family were forced to confront the person responsible for their loss. A video recording of the proceedings captured the moment. Jones can be seen standing before the judge while the victim's family stands in the first row, addressing the court. Suddenly, Fields' father, wearing a green shirt, rushes at Jones. He punches him in the back of the head and tackles him to the ground. Security personnel reacted swiftly, prying the two men apart. Jones, visibly shaken, was escorted out of the courtroom. The courtroom, once a place of somber proceedings, descended into a scene of pandemonium. It took several moments for order to be restored. The aftermath of this outburst resulted in additional charges. The father was arrested and charged with assault and battery in the 3rd degree. Justice, it seemed, took on a multifaceted form that day. A guilty plea, a father's desperate act, and the weight of legal consequences for all involved. Francisco Cledevaldo Mariano de Mora. The lengths to which people go to exact revenge can sometimes be blinding. Justice is meant to be served through a measured and lawful process. Yet grief and a burning desire for retribution can cloud even the clearest minds, pushing individuals towards desperate actions. Such was the case in the courtroom of São José do Belmonte, Brazil, where a son's thirst for vengeance erupted in a hail of gunfire. Francisco Alves, a man searching for a lost donkey, had tragically met his end at the hands of Francisco Cledevaldo Mariano de Mora. De Mora, confessing to the crime, now awaited his fate in the courtroom. But for Alves' son, Cristiano Alves Terto, the wheels of justice seemed to turn excruciatingly slow. The sterile atmosphere of the courtroom couldn't contain the inferno of rage burning within him. As proceedings continued, Terto, fueled by a primal need for vengeance, made a shocking move. He lunged forward, a .38 caliber revolver clutched in his hand. De Mora, the accused killer, sat just steps away, a juror and an attorney unwittingly positioned nearby. In a heartbeat, the sanctity of the courtroom dissolved. 2 gunshots shattered the silence, echoing off the walls as Terto opened fire on De Mora at close range. De Mora, caught off guard, instinctively ducked for cover. He scrambled towards a nearby desk, seeking refuge from the storm of bullets unleashed by Terto. But Terto, a man possessed by a singular purpose, relentlessly pursued him. Reaching De Mora, He emptied the entire chamber of his revolver into the man's body. Even with Demora crumpled on the floor, Turdo's rage remained unsated. He raised the gun once more, using it to deliver 2 brutal blows to Demora's head. Then, with a final desperate act, Turdo fled the scene, leaving behind a courtroom in disarray. In the aftermath of the shooting, a flurry of activity unfolded. Francisco Cledevaldo Mariano Demora, though riddled with bullets, clung to life. Paramedics swarmed the courtroom, tending to his wounds before rushing him to a nearby hospital. Demora, defying the odds, survived the attack. However, for security reasons, he was soon transferred to another medical facility roughly 250 miles from the courthouse. Meanwhile, the focus shifted to Cristiano Alves Terto. His desperate act of vengeance hadn't gone unnoticed. He was apprehended by Pernambuco police officials and placed under arrest. The charge against him: attempted murder. Justice, though undeniably disrupted by Turdo's actions, was still determined to take its course. News reports later indicated that Turdo remained incarcerated. As for Demora, the man Turdo so desperately sought to eliminate, the situation remained an unsettling paradox. The man accused of taking a life later walked free. The legal system, the very entity Turdo sought to bypass in his moment of fury, hadn't delivered the justice he craved. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.